I have raised 5 children, buried 2 husbands, and never asked anyone for help. That last part is important to understand what comes next. When my son Miguel lost his job at the construction company 3 months ago, he was devastated. He was too proud to admit it at first. He kept telling the family he was consulting on projects, transitioning to new opportunities, using words that meant he was sitting in the house while his wife worked as a bank manager and wondered why he wasn't submitting resumes. Miguel's wife is Jennifer. I have never been particularly close to Jennifer. She is what my daughters call ice cold, efficient, professional, distant. When Miguel married her 15 years ago, I hoped she would warm up. I thought love would soften her edges. But with each passing year, she seemed to become colder, more calculating, less human. After Miguel lost his job, Jennifer suggested he move in with me, temporarily. She said it would be good for him to have family support. She said she needed space to focus on her career without distractions. She said it so reasonably that even Miguel, who should have recognized the abandonment for what it was, accepted her logic. So Miguel came to live with me. My youngest child, the baby I had carried in my arms, came home like a teenager too afraid to face the world. I didn't mind. I never mind. I cooked for him, I did his laundry, I listened to his worries about finding a job, about the rejection, about wondering if he was worth anything anymore. I did what mothers do. It was a Friday afternoon when I went into the guest room to change the sheets. Miguel had been living with me for 6 weeks by then, and I had settled into a routine of caring for him. I never went into his private spaces unless necessary, but the sheets needed washing. As I was pulling off the old sheets, I noticed the corner of a document sticking out from under the mattress. It was carelessly hidden, the kind of place a teenager might hide something, not a 45-year-old man. I'm not proud of what I did next. I pulled out the document. It was a letter from a law firm, an official letter. The words "divorce petition" were clearly visible at the top. My hands began to tremble. I sat on the edge of the bed and read the entire letter. Jennifer had filed for divorce. She had hired a lawyer without telling Miguel. The petition outlined reasons: incompatibility, irreconcilable differences, but there was more. Much more. The lawyer had listed all of Miguel's debts: credit cards, personal loans, a second mortgage on their house that Miguel apparently didn't even know about. The financial picture Jennifer's lawyer had compiled was devastating. According to the documents, Miguel was not just unemployed, he was effectively insolvent. The petition argued that Miguel should receive minimal alimony support, that he had no claim on the marital home, which was in Jennifer's name, and that any custody arrangement for their adopted daughter, Sophia, should prioritize Jennifer's interests, given Miguel's financial instability. I sat there on that bed, holding papers that represented the systematic dismantling of my son's life, and I understood something I should have understood years ago. Jennifer hadn't brought Miguel to live with me out of kindness. She had brought him here because she needed him out of the house. She needed him gone so his absence could be used as evidence of his negligence. She needed him isolated and vulnerable so that when the divorce papers were served, he would have no support system, no money, nowhere to turn. Except he had me. I made a decision in that moment, a decision that would change everything. I didn't tell Miguel about the letter, not immediately. Instead, I called my daughter Rosa, who was a paralegal, and I asked her to come to my house. I told her it was urgent, but didn't explain why. When Rosa arrived, I showed her the documents. She read them in silence, her expression growing darker with each page. "This is aggressive," she said finally. "More than aggressive. It's predatory. Jennifer isn't just divorcing Miguel, she's dismantling him. She's building a case to show he's incompetent, unreliable, financially irresponsible. Everything in this petition is designed to make Miguel look bad and Jennifer look reasonable." "Can we stop her?" I asked. "We can fight back," Rosa said, "but we need to move fast." Once the papers are served, Miguel's only option is to respond through a lawyer. Before that, we have options. What options? Rosa thought for a moment. First, we need to understand the full extent of what Jennifer has done. Miguel clearly doesn't know about the second mortgage. He doesn't know about the degree of debt. Jennifer has been hiding financial information from him. That's fraud. That's illegal. We need to document everything. How do we do that? I'll need access to their house, Rosa said. Financial records, bank statements, anything that shows Jennifer's movements, her accounts, her secrets. I understood what my daughter was asking. She was asking me to help her spy on Jennifer, to go into my son's marital home and gather evidence. She was asking me to do something that under normal circumstances I would never do. But these weren't normal circumstances. These were circumstances where my son was about to be destroyed by a woman he loved. It took 3 days for Rosa and me to plan. We couldn't just break into Miguel and Jennifer's house. We needed access. We needed legitimacy. Miguel kept his house key with him. He had moved out so quickly that he hadn't taken much, but he had his keys. I suggested to Miguel that he should go get some of his belongings, clothes he liked, a watch that had belonged to his father, his photo albums. I suggested it casually, as if I were just trying to help him feel more settled in my home. He seemed grateful for the suggestion. He hadn't been back to the house since Jennifer asked him to leave. On the morning we decided to do this, I drove Miguel to the house. Rosa followed in her own car. Miguel let himself in with his key. Jennifer was at work. Their daughter Sophia was at school. The house was silent and cold. While Miguel was upstairs gathering his things, Rosa and I worked systematically. We photographed everything: bank statements, property deeds, credit card statements in Jennifer's name only, a separate checking account that Miguel apparently knew nothing about, insurance documents showing that Jennifer had increased the life insurance on Miguel by $500,000, making herself the beneficiary. That last document made my blood run cold. "This is beyond predatory," Rosa whispered. "This is dangerous." We found Jennifer's laptop in her home office. Rosa had brought a flash drive. She was able to copy files from the laptop without leaving any obvious trace. Tax returns that had been filed without Miguel's signature. Falsified documents showing Miguel's debt. Emails between Jennifer and a private investigator tracking Miguel's movements. Jennifer had been documenting Miguel's life like he was a criminal. When Miguel came downstairs with his bags, he found Rosa and me standing in the living room with pale faces. "What's wrong?" he asked immediately. We showed him everything. Every document, every email, every piece of evidence of Jennifer's systematic betrayal. His face, as he read through the papers, was a study in the destruction of trust. "This can't be real," he said. "This isn't Jennifer. Jennifer doesn't, she wouldn't." "She would," Rosa said gently, "and she has." Miguel sat down on the expensive couch that Jennifer had chosen, and he cried. He cried like his heart was breaking, which I suppose it was. With Rosa's help, we hired a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. We hired someone who specialized in fraud cases, divorce cases, and cases where one party had systematically hidden assets and information. Our lawyer's name was David Chen, and he was brilliant. He reviewed all the evidence we had gathered and smiled a cold smile. "She made mistakes," he said. "Significant mistakes. The increased life insurance is the worst one. That suggests possible intent to harm. Combined with the falsified documents, the hidden accounts, the unauthorized debt, we have a case." "What kind of case?" I asked. "Multiple kinds. We can fight this divorce aggressively. We can argue that everything she's done is fraudulent, that any agreements made under these circumstances are void. We can pursue criminal charges for the forged documents. We can involve insurance investigators about the life insurance increase. And we can go after her professionally. Her bank employer needs to know what she's done." "What do you think will happen?" Miguel asked quietly. "I think Jennifer is going to be very shocked when she realizes she's not dealing with a passive, unemployed man. She's going to realize she's dealing with a legal team and a family that won't let her destroy your life." Over the next month, everything changed. David filed a response to Jennifer's divorce petition that was essentially a legal bomb. He outlined everything: the fraud, the hidden accounts, the falsified documents, the unauthorized debt. He argued that the entire petition was based on false premises and that Jennifer should be investigated for fraud. Jennifer's lawyer called David's office within hours of receiving the paperwork. The negotiations that followed were tense and heavily weighted toward our side. Jennifer had miscalculated badly. She had assumed Miguel was weak and alone. She hadn't accounted for a family of 5 siblings who would go to war for him, and for a mother who would do anything to protect her children. The investigation by the bank's compliance department happened quietly but thoroughly. They found evidence that Jennifer had used her position at the bank to falsify records, to create a false picture of Miguel's creditworthiness. She had done this without authorization, without Miguel's knowledge, and without legitimate business purpose. She was terminated. The life insurance increase became the subject of investigation by the state insurance commissioner. After review, the increase was deemed suspicious and was reduced back to the original amount. The policy was flagged in Jennifer's file, permanently damaging her professional reputation in the financial services industry. 3 months into our counteroffensive, Jennifer made a critical mistake. She tried to access one of the hidden accounts and discovered that Rosa, acting with proper legal authority, had frozen all of Jennifer's separate accounts. Every penny she had hidden away was now locked down pending the court proceedings. Jennifer called Miguel. She called me. She left a voicemail message that I will never forget. Her voice was shaking with rage and fear. "Whatever your family is doing, stop it. You don't know what you're doing. You're destroying everything. Call your lawyer and call mine. We need to settle this now. I will give you whatever you want. Just stop." She sounded terrified. It was the first time I realized that Jennifer was human, that she could be afraid, that she had limitations. The divorce settlement was negotiated in a small conference room with all parties present. Jennifer looked nothing like the confident, cold woman I had known for 15 years. She looked frightened and diminished. David laid out the terms. 1. Miguel would receive 60% of the marital assets, far above the usual 50%. 2. Jennifer would pay $2,000 monthly in spousal support for 5 years. 3. Miguel would have primary custody of Sophia, with Jennifer having supervised visitation. 4. All hidden accounts would be fully disclosed and divided. 5. Jennifer would admit to wrongdoing in writing, acknowledging the fraud and falsified documents. Jennifer's lawyer argued, pleaded, made counteroffers. Jennifer herself cried, but she had no leverage. Every move she made was countered by evidence of fraud. Every argument she made was demolished by documentation. In the end, she signed. But the legal proceedings weren't over. David moved forward with criminal charges. Jennifer was charged with fraud, document falsification, and potentially insurance fraud. A prosecutor took the case personally, viewing it as a particularly egregious example of fraud within the financial services industry. Jennifer's defense was that she had been trying to protect herself, that she was afraid Miguel was becoming unstable due to unemployment, that her actions were motivated by concern for Sophia. It was a compelling narrative. It didn't matter. The evidence was overwhelming. Jennifer was convicted on 3 counts. She received a sentence of 2 years in a minimum security facility plus 3 years of probation. Her career was destroyed. Her professional licenses were revoked. I watched the sentencing from the courtroom gallery. When the judge announced the conviction and sentence, I felt something I wasn't expecting: sadness. Yes, Jennifer had tried to destroy my son. Yes, she had committed fraud and lied repeatedly. Yes, she deserved punishment. But she was also a woman who had somehow become so broken that she believed the only way to feel powerful was to destroy someone else. I didn't forgive her. I'm not sure I could ever forgive her, but I understood that she was trapped in her own kind of prison long before the court sentenced her to an actual one. Miguel's life didn't become easy after Jennifer's conviction. In fact, in many ways, it became harder. He had to adjust to being a primary parent to Sophia, who was angry and hurt by what had happened. He had to rebuild his self-esteem after months of believing he was worthless. He had to build a new career while managing his daughter and his trauma. But he had something he wouldn't have had if I hadn't found that letter. He had a family fighting beside him. He had resources. He had a future that wasn't destroyed. 6 months after Jennifer's conviction, Miguel found a new job. It wasn't the same kind of construction work he had done before. It was better, project management for a large development company. The salary was higher, the stability was greater. He moved out of my house and into a small apartment with Sophia. They were happy, or at least they were healing. Rosa and David became close friends. David had been moved by the case, by the injustice of it, and by the determination of our family to fight. He often came over for dinner, and eventually he and Rosa started dating. A year later, they were engaged. I continued my life in my own house, which seemed quieter now that Miguel had moved out, but it was a good kind of quiet, a peaceful quiet, the kind that comes from knowing you've done the right thing. One afternoon, I received a letter from Jennifer. She was in the minimum security facility, and she had written to me. The letter was formal and carefully worded, written in the stilted language of someone communicating through a monitored system. Dear Mrs. Mendez, I am writing to you because I cannot speak to Miguel, and I believe you are the only person in your family who might listen. I was wrong. Not just legally wrong, although I clearly was. I was fundamentally wrong. I was wrong to believe that destroying someone else would make me feel powerful. I was wrong to think that I could hide who I really am. I was wrong about almost everything. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect anything. I just want you to know that I understand now what I did. I understand the harm I caused. I understand that Miguel is a good man and that Sophia loves her father, and I tried to take that away from her. I am receiving counseling here. I am trying to understand how I became the person I was. It is not easy work. I will be released in 14 months. I don't know what I will do then. I don't expect Miguel or Sophia or your family to allow me any contact. But I hope someday, perhaps years from now, Sophia will understand that I was broken and that my actions came from my own brokenness, not from her or Miguel's failings. I am very sorry. Jennifer. I read the letter 3 times. Then I showed it to Miguel. He read it once and set it aside without comment. What do you want to do? I asked him. I want to let her have the opportunity to build a new life, he said finally. Not because she deserves it, but because Sophia will have to live with whatever happens. And I don't want Sophia's life to be defined by Jennifer's crimes. So I'm going to tell her that when she gets out, she can call. I'll decide then whether I want her to have supervised visits with Sophia, but I'm not going to make that decision out of anger. Miguel had grown. He had been tested and hadn't broken. That was all a mother could ask. Sophia graduated from high school at 17. She was smart and kind and resilient. She had survived her parents' divorce without becoming bitter. She had a relationship with her father that was healthy and based on genuine affection. She even had a cautious relationship with her mother, supervised visits at first, then gradually more independence. Jennifer, after her release, had reinvented herself. She was working as a financial counselor for a nonprofit that helped people in financial crisis. It seemed to me like a kind of redemption, though I was never entirely sure if redemption was truly possible for what she had done. Miguel had been promoted to regional director of his company. He was respected, loved by Sophia, and he had eventually started dating again. He was building a life that was real and good. My role in all of this had been complicated. I had invaded privacy. I had gathered evidence without permission. I had conspired with Rosa to spy on Jennifer. By many measures, what I did was wrong. But by the measures that mattered, protecting my child, exposing fraud, preventing further harm, what I did was right. I had learned something that took me 70 years to fully understand. Being a good mother sometimes means doing things that are not traditionally good. Sometimes it means breaking rules. Sometimes it means going to war against the people who would hurt your children. I had also learned that being a good mother means eventually letting go. Miguel was a grown man. He had to make his own decisions about Jennifer, about forgiveness, about what kind of person he wanted to be. All I could do was provide the foundation, the information, the support. The rest was up to him. One evening, Miguel came to my house for dinner. He brought Sophia. He brought his new girlfriend, Maria, who was kind and smart and looked at Miguel like he was someone worth loving. We sat at my table, the table where I had fed 5 children over the decades, and we shared a meal and stories. Sophia told me about her college plans. Miguel told me about a project at work. Maria laughed at my jokes. And I looked at this family I had fought for, this family I had protected, and I felt something that could only be described as peace. I had done the right thing, even when it wasn't the easy thing. I had chosen my son over social convention. I had chosen truth over comfort. And here we were, on the other side of chaos, intact and whole. That was enough.